Today's lesson is going to be a short one, and what we are going to do is just to keep reorganizing our project in order for us to make it grow more clean and stable. And we are going to implement a camera controller that will allow us to switch the cameras between first person to third person and handle anything related with the camera. First of all, in case that you don't have the progress with it so far, you can download it from this link. There are a couple of fixes that I made in the code in relationship with the last lesson, so I recommend you to download it. So now we are going to implement a singleton pattern that will deal with any operation related with the camera. We are going to implement a system that will allow to switch the camera between two states. The two states will be the first person camera, that is the behavior that we had so far, and the third person camera, where we will control the camera around the player. For the third person camera, we are going to use the 3D model that you can find in this path. That is the protagonist I used for one of my games. Now back to the Unity project. Let's create the script CameraController in our folder of controllers. And we are going to add the accessor code in order for us to use it as a singleton. Okay, just take the code from somewhere else and use it here and replace what needs to be replaced. Okay, so you have the accessor implemented right here, and we are going to create two public variable members that will make reference to the camera and the player. Okay, and back to the Unity editor, we are going to create an empty game object that we will call CameraController, and we will add the script CameraController. Okay, and we are going to set both properties, game camera and game player, with the reference to the player and the main camera. Back to the CameraController script, we are going to inherit from state machine to have the functionality to be able to change the state. So what we are going to do is that we are going to create two states, name it like this, camera first person and camera third person. And what you are going to do now is just to create the skeleton both in the update and extending the change state method. After that, in the start method, you should change to the camera in first person, because we are going to always start in the first person camera. So go ahead and do it. And the code should look similar to this. We have created that two constants that represents both states of the camera in first person and the camera in third person. Next, we have created, extended the change state just to check in which state we are transitioning into, and also created the skeleton of it also in the update method. So now that we have implemented the skeleton of the structure of the camera controller, we are going to implement the functionality of the state, the camera in first person. What we are going to do is just replicate the logic we are already running for the camera in the player. This logic right here, we are going to translate this logic right here and this logic right here. We are going to move it from the player to the camera controller. So go ahead and do it. And the result should look similar to this. What we have first done is to just to calculate the forward and the position where the camera is going to be, okay? And we are going to store that information into private member variables that are accessible to the outside through these two getters, okay? And we are just setting the value of these both variables with the information we need. For the position, we just get the position of the player. We are going just to place the camera in the same position as the center of the player is. That's the easy part. And the harder part is this one. We are calculating through the movement of the mouse the rotation that we need to calculate, okay? And this rotation we multiply it by the vector 3 forward in order to get the final forward of the camera. We store that information in the private member variable. We set the forward we want just with the coordinates x and z for the player, and this store forward is going to be used in the camera controller. In the update state, we are going to get the position of the camera from the getter, and also the forward of the camera from the getter. So by this way, we have moved the logic from one place to the other. If we proceed to go to the project and play it, we should get exactly the same behavior as before, okay? So we can move around. The shoot is still working, so nothing has changed. So we are good. So now we are going to move all the existing logic connected with the camera from the player into the camera controller script. Okay, the steps that we are going to do is first, let's go to the code. And on the player script, we are going just to remove the public member my camera. That will cause some compiler errors that we are going to fix. Now the camera is managed by the camera controller, and we have to make reference to the Singleton to access to the camera. So we just make reference to Singleton camera controller instance game camera, and in all the places where we made reference to the camera, now we are going to make reference to the Singleton controller to the camera. Okay, so we are going to fix all these. Once you have fixed it, just save, go back to the Unity editor, play, and ensure that everything is still working as expected. Okay, so the camera is working, the shooting is working, everything seems to be working. Okay. So now we are going to implement the state camera third person on the camera controller script. So the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to implement a method that will be called switch camera state that will allow us to switch between cameras. Okay, you will have to check the input, and if the input is pressed, change to one state or the other. You will be switching back and forth between camera on first person and camera on third person. Okay, so let's start with that method. Go to the code, go to the camera controller script, and implement the switch camera state. So do it. Okay, and the code should look similar to this. We have implemented a private method, switch camera state, and we are checking if the input, in this case I have chosen this key. You can choose whatever key you want. And when this key is detected to be pressed down, we check the current state and we switch to the other one. Okay, if we are on first person, we change the state to third person. If we are on third person, we transition to the first person. The next thing that we have done is in the update, we are checking for the key. Okay, so we are checking every cycle for the key pressed in order to switch between these two states. Okay, the next step, we are going to declare this public variable member, just right here. And this would be the offset that is going to take the camera on third person that will be placed just in the back of the player. Okay, so the distance will be just 3 meters above the player and 5 meters behind the player. Okay. Now you have to implement the method camera follow avatar, and this method will position the camera with the offset from the player. Okay. And the forward vector of the camera will be looking at the player. Okay. Finally, find out where to call camera follow avatar. So go ahead and do it. And the result should look similar to this. We have implemented a new private method, camera follow avatar, and we're placing the camera in an offset from the position of the player. Okay. Next thing is that we are interested that the forward vector of the camera is looking at the player, and we are getting that information just by getting the vector from the camera position to the player position. Okay, so if we proceed to run the project and we press the key to switch the camera, we should get this behavior. Okay, the camera has been placed just behind the back of the player, and the camera is looking at the player. Okay, so far so good. So now, as an optional exercise, what I suggest you to do is just to search for improving the method camera follow avatar. So we use the mouse in order to rotate around the player. Okay, so you will have to do some searching to find out how to rotate around the player. But this is an optional exercise, okay? And if you don't want to do it, I am going just to place the solution right here, but you have just a moment to consider if you want to do this extra exercise, so feel free to do it. Okay, and the result should look similar to this. We are taking the information from the mouse in order to apply the offset, to adjust the offset depending rotation of the mouse, and we are applying that new calculated offset to the player's position. So now if we go to the Unity project and press play, we switch to the third person camera, and now if you move the mouse, you are able to rotate around the player. The next thing that we are going to do, we are going to fix the shots for the third person camera. If you have noticed, let's test it. Well, let's play. When you shoot, the shoots come from the position, the current position of the camera, and this is wrong. We need to fix it. So that's what we are going to do here. What we are going to do first, on the CameraController script, we are going to add a new method that will be called isFirstPersonCamera. And this method will return true or false depending if the camera is in first person. Okay, so let's do it. And the result should look similar to this. We just declared a function that returns Boolean called isFirstPersonCamera that just returns if the state is in the first person camera. Okay, what we are going to do now on the player script, we are going to find out where the bullet is being shot. Okay, so go ahead and find the place. So this is the place where we are shooting the bullet. So here what we need to do is just to access to the CameraController Singleton, to the method we just implemented, the isFirstPersonCamera. And with that information, we will be able to differentiate from shooting from the first person camera and shooting from the third person camera. So implement the condition and leave empty the option for the third person camera. Okay, and results should look similar to this. We are checking if through the Singleton CameraController if the camera is on first person, and if it's on first person, we store the position and the forward in these two local variables that we will eventually use to shoot the bullet. Okay. Now it's time for you to implement the necessary settings of these two local variables in order to be able to shoot in third person. So go ahead and do it. and the result should look similar to this. For the initial position of the bullet, we are just taking the player's position, okay? And for the direction that is going forward the bullet, we are just taking the coordinates X and Z that the camera is looking forward. We don't consider the Y component because then we will be shooting in the forward vector of the camera, and we are only interested that just to shoot forward in the same plane of the player. Okay, if we go to the Unity project and proceed to play, now switching to the third-person camera and shooting, you will see that the bullets are starting on the position of the player, and the direction that are taking the bullets matches with the direction of the camera is looking. Okay, so we are good. So now that we have our system to switch between cameras, we are going to replace the current capsule that we have as our player for a 3D model with animations. So what we are going to do is just to create the animation controller with three animations that would be the animation of idle, the animation of run, and the animation of die. Just remember what we did to create animations both for the enemies and the NPCs. Identify where you should change the animations for the player, where you should change to idle and where you should change to run, and where you should change it to die. And just remember for the moment to disable the mesh renderer of the player in order to, when you are working on first-person view, to disable the 3D model so it's not in the way. So go ahead and do it. Okay, and the code should look similar to this. What we have first done has been to create the animator controller data. We have created the three states with transitions between both of them. You have to have in mind that we can transition from die to idle or run because we have to restore the life of the player when it's killed. Okay, so we need the transitions back, and we have created the animation ID, the parameter, in order to be able then in the code just to call the animation system, okay, our animation system that we are inheriting from Avatar, okay. So we change the animation to idle on the start, and when we change of states from idle to walk, we change the animation to idle or run. Finally, when we are killed, we change the animation to death. So the result, if you play it, okay, let's switch there. So we have our 3D model, and we are switching between both walking and idle. And if we get killed, let's be killed by one of the enemies, for example. A little bit faster, maybe. Okay, and the animation of death is being triggered. If we press replay, the player is restored to the idle animation, and we can start over. So far, so good. You may have noticed that if we keep on the first player camera view, we are still showing the 3D avatar. And we are interested in this particular case just to hide it, okay? And when we switch from one camera to another, we still have the 3D model in first person view, and we are interested to disable, okay? So any ideas of how to detect, how to observe the event when the camera has been switched from third person to first person? Is there any existing tool that we can already use to detect, to observe the events? If your response has been yes, we can use the system event controller. It's one option, not the only one, but it's one option. And what we are going to do is we are going to create two new events that will be triggered just when the camera has been switched from first person to third person and from third person to first person. And these two events will be triggered just in the exact moment that we are switching the camera. Okay, the player should look for these events, and what the player should do when it receives these events is to disable the 3D model. Okay, this 3D model, it should be disabled when we are on first person view. Okay, so in first person we disable, in third person we enable. So go ahead and do it. Okay, and the result should look similar to this. What we have first done is to create the two constants with the name of the events. Okay, and after that we have dispatched them in the change state of the camera controller. That is the exact moment when we detect that we have changed from one state to another. We dispatch both events. Then in the side of the player is listening, Okay, he's listening to the system event controller, and when he receives a new event, he checks, okay, it's the event of camera switched to first person, then we disable the 3D model so it's not in the way when working on first person view. If it's if we have changed to a third camera person, then we re-enable the 3D model. Okay, so if we go, well, the first thing that we need to do is by default also just disable the default thing, because it starts always in first person. And now if we go to the project and run it, okay, we start on first person, we don't have the model on the way, but when we switch to the third person camera, we have the model, but switching back to the first person, we don't have the model in the way. So we are listening the event to of changing the cameras, and we are re-enabling the model between these two cameras. To end this lesson, the exercises that we are going to do are going to be the next. The first exercise that we are going to do is we are going to change, instead of shooting with the spacebar, we are going to shoot with the mouse click button, with the left mouse click button, and we are going to lock the mouse when we are running the game. Okay, so let's start doing this exercise. So just do it. And the code should look similar to this. The first thing that we have done is we are going to lock the cursor. So when we are only on the running state, the cursor is not going to be in the way. But when we leave the game running state, we are going to re-enable the cursor. Okay? So for all the rest of the cases, pause, lose, win, that we have to interact with different screens, we are going to re-enable the cursor. And the next thing that we have done is on the player script, instead of shooting by checking if the spacebar has been pressed, we are just checking if the left mouse button has been pressed. So if we proceed to play, here we have the mouse, but if we press play and go into play running state, you can see that mouse is nowhere to be seen. And now we are shooting with the mouse. Okay, if we press pause, we restore the mouse. If we go back to the game, we lock the cursor and we don't see it again. And the next exercise that we are going to do is that we are going to add a new state to the camera controller that we will call camera frozen. That will be used when we don't want any logic to be applied to the camera. Okay, because so far, if we go to the code, for the camera controller, we have the states, camera first person, a camera third person. And for both states, we are running in the update some logic in the first person camera, just in order to work in the first person camera, and in the third person camera, following the avatar. What we are going to do now is to add a new state that will be called camera frozen, that won't happen anything. So implement the whole thing, create the state, create the skeleton, create a public method so anyone can call this method on the Singleton camera controller to freeze the camera, to change to this camera frozen state. And also create a method to restore the state of the camera where it previously was. Finally, find out where to call it in the code. So go ahead and do it. Okay, and the result should look similar to this. What we have done first, we have created the new state. Okay, we have created the constant, and we have created the skeleton, both for in the change state and in the update. Okay, and it's not going to happen anything in the update because we are interested that the camera is just frozen. And we have then created a public method that the CameraController Singleton is going to offer to the outside in order to be able to freeze the camera to change to this new state. And this method has a parameter that allows to, okay, I am interested to freeze it or unfreeze it. And if we are going to freeze it, we just change to the new state, to the camera frozen state. But if we are unfreezing it, okay, I have created this method in the state machine. Just remember that CameraController is inheriting from a state machine. So in a state machine, we have created this new method that it will just restore the previous state, okay? And well, if everything is right and we proceed to run, when we press the pause button, the camera has entered in the frozen state, and well, it will resume the behavior when we press on the resume button. We press on the resume button and we restore the behavior. And with this exercise, we would have finished this lesson about the CameraController Singleton.